I think it was your split vote, and then you had votes for Lesnar versus The Undertaker, while not a great match per se, was so significant that there were some votes on that side too. So I think one of these matches would have been a runner-up for sure. Had it not been a split vote.
Dan, what would have gotten your vote?
Well, it was tough because I think from some of the matches that blew me away, really, really blew me away, were things that I watched from overseas, things from Japan. I think there was a really great, I think it was, off the top of my head, it was the Time Splitters against Forever Hooligans, maybe against the Young Bucks at a Ring of Honor New Japan show in Toronto. Was just incredible for what it was, with the just impeccable timing and the moves and everything else. But I mean, that's such a small stage. I mean, it was a great match to see and to see live. It didn't have the significance overall as a match of the year would have. And I don't think this year had a lot of great matches like that, which is one of the reasons why I think there's a relatively low total percentage for the winner. There were a lot of very good matches, but nothing really great in WWE or TNA on that national stage. That being said, I think maybe the match of the year that I would have chosen, either of them are kind of weak matches, but they're both significant, would have been Brock Lesnar ending the streak at WrestleMania, or Brock Lesnar beating John Cena at SummerSlam, because those are the two matches that I most remember from WWE last year, just because they were so unique.
Yeah, and I think it gets to what Stu touched on, and philosophy is a great match, a memorable match, a historically significant one. Neither of those matches, in some senses, are the classical great match, right? I mean, Brock Lesnar and John Cena at SummerSlam was essentially whatever it was, 12, 15-minute squash. And Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, throughout, separate the ending, it was not a good match. I mean, I remember kind of, sitting on my hands during the match. It was pretty dull. And part of it was, again, it was almost a given. It was an afterthought what the result would be. And it was the finish that really elevated to something special. But also, I think Bray Wyatt and John Cena had, a really terrific match at Payback. It's one of those kind of, low-profile, B-level pay-per-views, easy to forget in the big picture, but you isolate that match and the excitement and, the crowd's reaction. Again, the Usos' involvement, the Wyatt's involvement. There were some great spots, but it wasn't a spot fest by any stretch of the imagination. It was well built. It was kind of the classic WWE main event style match, especially for those kind of mid-year pay-per-views. They love the gimmick matches. They love John Cena wrestling up the aisleway, using props, that kind of thing. And sometimes those fall way short. And this one, I thought, hit kind of exactly right.
I don't think I reviewed I went over the runners-up. Let me just do that quick.
Sure.
The Shield versus the Wyatt family.
Great match, yep. Or good match, very good match.
Sami Zayn versus Cesaro.
Yep.
And a three-way with the Wolves, Hardys, and Team 3D.
The latter match on one of the last editions of Impact on Spike. Yep. I wasn't crazy about that match. I mean, I'm fine with people voting for it, but to me, that's in some ways kind of the worst in wrestling. And part of what I didn't like about it was that it was billed before it even aired as, we're going to go have the match of the year. And it gets to philosophy. It speaks to TNA's vision and maybe the vision of some of the wrestlers in that match, that to them putting on a match of the year just means, these crazy bombs really putting their bodies at risk on a show that, unfortunately didn't mean a whole lot at that point, wasn't watched by a ton of people. I wouldn't have had that in the mix.
Dan mentioned before that a lot of the great matches happened overseas, and particularly in Japan. And I don't think we saw that in the results. We certainly didn't get a runner-up for a New Japan match, although the match, that just goes to educating the readership so that they really become aware. And I think I think that's calming. I think what we're seeing now is New Japan starting to show matches on internet pay-per-views in the United States. Actually, I think it was maybe a regular pay-per-view. I'm not even sure at this point.
Yeah.
Wrestle Kingdom was an amazing show, and it's getting a tremendous amount of positive feedback. It just for information, I have the Wrestling Observer newsletter in front of me, and the New Japan Wrestle Kingdom poll results. Thumbs up, 373, 100%.
Wow.
No thumbs down, obviously, no thumbs in the middle. And the match that was selected was amazing, unbelievable. But people
Tanahashi and Okada
was Nakamura versus
Nakamura.
Okay, yeah, they're both great.
And the incredible match was the title match with Tanahashi defending the IWGP title against Okada, the latest in their series of unbelievable matches. And but now with New Japan getting a little bit more U.S. exposure in their show, starting on
Access
TV. I think that's the 16th, which is, as we speak now, only 2 days away. They have a 13-episode run on Access. People are going to be more exposed. I hope they watch it. I hope they start to learn a little bit about New Japan. It is the Japanese version of WWE, but different. In terms of scope, it's the WWE of Japan. But in terms of the type and the style of matches, it's unique.
One thing I think with that, and I agree, I think that every fan should be exposed to what's happening in Japan, worldwide, in Mexico too, but New Japan over the past 2 years or so has really been the promotion to watch. But the thing that's interesting is the fans who are paying attention to New Japan, you do have, I guess if in WWE, for lack of a better term, instead of all of U.S. wrestling, we'll just focus on WWE. If WWE didn't have one standout match of the year this year, they had a few very good ones that you can kind of debate and split the vote, like Stu said with WrestleMania. New Japan had probably a half dozen that were really viable match of the year contenders. And you might split the vote that way too. So one of the things that we may see, and I agree Wrestle Kingdom was a great match, but there are people who think, as you guys just kind of noted, that maybe the Okada-Tanahashi match was better than the Nakamura match. Even in that show, there's a little bit of debate about what the better match was. And
I'd like to see more first place votes for any New Japan match. But we can't. All we could do as a magazine is make people aware, and we're trying to ramp up our coverage of New Japan. We're doing Dan, you write the international report, and you lay out what's going on there. We're doing a feature story on the on the Wrestle Kingdom part in the next issue of PWI. We'll have a picture of just about every match in there. We're getting so. We're going to try to do our part to keep people aware of what's going on the other side of the world, and then people just need to tune in and just kind of educate themselves as to what's going on there, and they'll be better for it.
This seems like a good time to ask. Then, can you pony up the money and fly us out to Japan and cover a couple shows?
Unfortunately, it goes by seniority, and Matt Brock will be out there for the next show.
Brock,
he gets all the assignments
after all the money he spent on. Bad sake and everything else in his expense reports back in the day, you're going to send him back?
One place where we could have some influence, and it's not a lobbying or a prediction, is the PWI 500. And we always have, or we typically have some Japanese wrestlers fairly high, but you wonder if they can keep this pace, and certainly depending on what WWE does, is this the year that a New Japan wrestler scores number one, ranks number one in the PWI 500, and certainly Tanahashi may be on his way to that.
That is true.
Yeah. Tanahashi, but again, Nakamura, I know he's the IC champion there, but the way that they present the IC title isn't like WWE. It's a secondary title, but in some ways it's just as almost on equal footing with the heavyweight title. Right. So they both have a rightful claim.
Yeah. Let's not spend too much time on the other awards, but we'll go through them. Why don't we talk about Rookie of the Year?
Stu,
Stu, who took home Rookie of the Year 2014?
Rookie of the Year is Miss Charlotte.
Yes, Ric Flair's daughter, I believe the current NXT Women's Champion. I was happy to see her take this, and for better or for worse, some of the winners in recent years haven't been the most recognizable names, and I think that era of the Rookie of the Year, almost being a surefire, automatic future sensation has changed a lot, and it doesn't have to do with the quality of rookies, but it has to do with how wrestling's changed, and just the business model and kind of the disappearance of territories and that kind of thing. But when you get somebody like Charlotte, who is young and new, and obviously the legacy, the daughter of arguably the greatest wrestler of all time, and had the year that she had I think I'm not sure if it's her first or second year, but certainly still a rookie. It was kind of a no-brainer this year.
She got 50% of the vote.
Yeah.
So that tells you all you need to know right there.
Well, she had the prominence of being in NXT and was a rookie. A lot of the people who are in NXT, have been in the business 5, 6, 10 years in some cases. She was a rookie who qualified with the national outlet. So, and plus the last name didn't hurt.
No. But you know what? That last name has been a curse in the past, right? I mean, we saw it with David Flair, however many years ago, more than 10 years ago, and having to carry that name and that legacy. Again, could be quite the burden, and it's so interesting considering that he had two sons that tried their hand in the business. David Flair, I don't know, ever really quite had it, and obviously the tragic ending with Reed. It's incredible that it may be his daughter that really carries the legacy, really is the next great Flair. And you see it. I mean, she really is. We touched on this, Dan, when we talked about the female 50 a couple weeks ago. But there's a small part of me that dreads the day she joins WWE, because the kind of thing you see her doing at NXT, I'm not sure she'll be able to do. And I mean, we already got a taste of it in her one WWE match on Raw, which was just really, really unfortunate. So there's a small part of me that doesn't want to see her get called up.
Yeah, it's a shame that's kind of how it is now, especially with the women's division, where you work so hard to get there, and if you're lucky, you might get a 3-minute match on Raw that's kind of sandwiched between commercials, or it's really a setup for something on Total Divas or something along those lines. But what's interesting too with the Rookie of the Year award, she's only the third woman to win Rookie of the Year, and the first was actually Medusa Maselli back in 1988. Believe it or not, Medusa beat out both Chris Benoit and Scott Steiner, who had runner-up that year. And then the big stretch went by, and then Veda Scott in 2012. And now, so with only 3 women getting Rookie of the Year in the past, 3 years, 2 women have got the award. So it's kind of interesting to see that there is this kind of uptick in women getting involved with wrestling, being very successful early, and kind of getting that national prominence.
I think we might have a front runner for next year in Tessa Blanchard. She was not a runner-up. The runner-up in order were Enzo Amore, Mojo Rawley, and Chad Gable, all NXT wrestlers. Mm-hmm. But Tessa was included in the votes for others, so she still qualifies and for Rookie of the Year for next year. And a lot of people were a little upset that she didn't get at least a runner-up spot this year, and she's pretty talented, and we might see 2 women in a row get the Rookie of the Year. Who knows? And
both of them are with horseman fathers.
Interesting, yeah. Yes.
and it really speaks to how NXT is kind of changing the landscape. That they dominated the Rookie of the Year balloting this year. And, when you're a rookie and you're featured on WWE Network and you're watched by hundreds of thousands of fans each week, it right out of the gate gives you a huge advantage over anybody else starting off in the business. Let's talk a bit about Most Improved Wrestler of the Year. Who took that?
Okay. Most Improved Wrestler of this year is Rusev.
Yeah, I could see that. Was as dominant as anybody in 2014, is yet to score a pinfall or submission loss. Seems to be slated for a big match at WrestleMania. I think the obvious opponent is John Cena. We'll see if that ends up happening. I don't know that he's ever blown me away as far as what he does in the ring, but for that kind of wrestler, that kind of act, I think he's just fine, and I think he's carrying himself pretty well.
The runners-up were Ethan Carter III, Luke Harper, and Eric Young.
Dan, you got any thoughts on any of those runner-ups?
On the runners-up, it's funny because none of them. Well, I think the only one of those three who improved noticeably in the classic definition of the word would have been Ethan Carter III, who's really kind of developed into a real top heel. His ring style is he's just progressed. The other guys have both been great talents, especially on Luke Harper in his previous life is Brody Lee on the Independents for a decade before he got into WWE, and Eric Young, for people who are familiar with his previous work when he's not kind of clowning around. Incredible talent, both of those guys. It's just that this year those two had more of an opportunity to showcase those skills, and that really kind of that's a difference to look at. True improvement versus just a greater opportunity to show what you can do. But in some cases, they both kind of get covered with this award. So I think they're all good candidates for runners-up positions.
Yeah, for better or for worse, sometimes it's less about how they improved their game and more about how fans took notice. In that way, it's kind of the breakout award. And again, a guy like Luke Harper, who's been really good for years. 2014 was the year that fans took notice, in part because he was part of this big act with the Wyatt family. Eric Young, he won the world title technically. I've always thought he's just fine. I almost feel like the world title run may have hurt him more than helped him because I think so few people really took him seriously, and there was these comparisons drawn to Daniel Bryan, who was the world champion at the time at WWE, and TNA was essentially inviting those comparisons, and I mean just so mishandled. And I like Eric Young a lot, but again, I don't know that he really improved in 2014. What else is there? Let's talk about Inspirational Wrestler of the Year. Who took that this year?
Okay, I have to flip through. Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, you think about his 2013 into 2014, and the fact that at the beginning of 2014, the talk was that he was going to be in a mid-card match at WrestleMania against Sheamus, maybe as a heel member of the Wyatt family. He was just so off track early in the year. And, the plan for WrestleMania was Batista versus Randy Orton, I believe, for the world title. Batista's a babyface. And just through the sheer will of the fans, they pushed him into that moment that every wrestler dreams of, closing WrestleMania in a shower of confetti, holding 2 world title belts, having won 2 matches, beating a legend in Triple H earlier in the night. It is absolutely the storybook ending. And, a few weeks ago when he was teasing maybe retiring, certainly that would have been unfortunate for him. But there was part of me that thought, if you're going to retire, you can't go out any higher than you did. So absolutely well-deserved.
It's interesting. The runners-up, fairly predictable. Eric Young, his rise was sort of inspirational, I suppose. Chris Melendez, we know his story. But Dan, talk about the third runner-up, if you can, Ashley Six, a guy who gets virtually no ink in our magazine, and is not exactly a household name in the world of wrestling, but
yet, right? Yeah, he's going to be part of the Top Prospect tournament in Ring of Honor, so he's going to be getting a little bit more attention. I've known him for a long time. He's a Ontario wrestler, and I'm based out of Buffalo, New York, so it's right over the river, and I'm up in Ontario quite often. But Ashley Six had he was diagnosed with cancer, and he really made it his mission to really kind of, he beat the cancer, he came back to wrestling. He was longtime friends with Michael Elgin, and he put on in his comeback match, a match against Michael Elgin where he beat Michael Elgin in a kind of fundraising match. And what he's really trying to do is he's dedicated his career to cancer awareness and doing whatever he can to kind of support, fundraising efforts to fight cancer. So he's not as well known, certainly. I know that I think Mike Bessler did a brief piece on his story in PWI a few issues back. And I know that he's really hungry to get more exposure and get more attention for both him and his career and his cause. So really interesting story, and it's very cool that he got a runner-up spot.
Yeah, I love to hear stories like that. I mean, certainly Chris Melendez has kind of a relatable story considering his disability and everything he was able to accomplish. So, yeah, inspirational in the true sense of the word. Gonna just quickly mention the other winners. Dean Ambrose won Most Popular Wrestler of the Year. Again, in a year where so many people were out for so long, where John Cena, always is a polarizing figure. Daniel Bryan out for half the year. That makes sense. Most hated was The Authority, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. Not necessarily active wrestlers, but, I don't think any act in wrestling had more heat than those two. Woman of the Year was AJ Lee was that the second time in a row?
I believe it's the third consecutive time.
Third time in a row. Wow. Yeah. That's unprecedented, right?
No, actually, I think, let me see. It is 1, 2, 3, the third time, but I think that, yes, it is unprecedented for three consecutive is unprecedented, but Trish Stratus has won it 4 times.
Okay.
But not in a row.
Yeah. And I think, am I forgetting anybody?
The
Comeback?
Award.
Comeback.
Oh, Comeback? Yep.
Who won Comeback? I don't have it in front of me.
Sting.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, seeing as how it one appearance on WWE pay-per-view.
But it also came, and this is with Dean Ambrose as well, it's good to think that once that ballot came out, and the way our ballots are tabulated, it's based on the actual print ballot that appears in the magazine. That came out right in the prime balloting period. It was when Sting debuted. So it's fresh in everybody's mind. A lot of people filled it out right then. Dean Ambrose was right in the midst of his most popular period of time. He's kind of cooled off significantly since then. But during the balloting period, I think that those two were both on a high that kind of helped them get those awards.
Right. And the one place where obviously we do have some say, and certainly, Stu, you've got some say, is the Stanley Weston Award. Can you talk a bit about this year's winner?
This year's winner is one of the most influential wrestlers and trainers of our generation and the past generation, Dory Funk Jr. I think the award for him is long overdue. He's done so much for this profession, and it's just he's a good man, and I know he knew Stanley Weston personally, and I think Stanley would be looking down right now and nodding in agreement. He would be very happy to have Dory Funk Jr. receive the award in his name.
Yes, absolutely. Joins a list of legends that have won that award, and legends don't come any bigger than Dory Funk Jr. I think that's everything. Am I forgetting anything?
Magazine, just to point out, in the magazine, there's a picture of Dory. He looks fit and ready to go right now. He looks amazing. He's in great shape. He works out constantly.
He still wrestles,
right?
Too.
Didn't he wrestle in Japan last year with his brother?
He wrestled in Japan, but he still regularly wrestles down with Bang TV with his training school. Amazing. So he's out there still going. Believe it or not.
73 years old. Wow, fantastic. Guys, thank you so much. I'm sure we will dissect and analyze some of these winners further in the coming weeks. We hope to have some of the winners and runners-up on with us in the next coming weeks. Until then, I'll give a final plug, PWI-online.com. That's a place to go to subscribe to the print version, the digital edition. Follow us on Twitter, @officialPWI, and find us on Facebook. Dan, thank you as always. Stu, thank you so much for joining us. We'll sure to get you back on pretty soon.
Thank you, guys.
And that's all for us. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.